and all right? Yeah, it's quite a thing. There you go, all the pumpkins for sale, 59 cents a pound. There you go. Yeah, I gotta stop talking there, you gotta check this out. So, alright, now we're gonna take a left on Mass Ave. Now my timing is off today, but this is, I keep mentioning Mass Ave, as this is supposedly the route that the British took on their way out to Concord. So getting ahead of myself a little bit, here they come, folks. 700 British soldiers, okay, down this dirty path. All right, trees all around it. Now I'll get back to that. Let me tell you, Paul Revere now, he had hooked up with the sexton or the custodian of the Old North Church, and he told him, you keep an eye on these men. And probably after 11 o'clock at night, they're going to try to get out here somehow. They'll probably either put their boats in the water at the Boston Harbor to go down the Charles River, and if they do, light 2 lanterns on the Old North Church steeple. Or if you notice them marching out here, they're not using their boats there, light 1 lantern, 1 if by land, 2 if by sea. So on that night of April 18th, 1775, about 11:15, 11:20 at night, the custodian, he looks down and he notices there they are 700 British soldiers, and they got bright red 100% woolen uniforms on, and they're on their way out. And he noticed them that they were all ready to be marching, and he was all ready to light 1 lantern. But what the heck are they doing? They're marching away from the water, but they're carrying their boats. And he kept watching and watching, and they went right across the Boston Common, and they put their boats right there in that corner of the Boston Common. The first thing I showed you this morning, right? And let these cars go by. And that's where they put their boats in the water, right there. And off they went. Now, the reason they did that was because nobody was out and about after 11 o'clock at night. And nobody would see them in downtown Boston because no houses there or anything, all businesses and nobody around. If they put their boats in the water at the Boston Harbor into the Charles River, then the people that lived along there would see them out their windows. So that's what they did. They put it there. And they went right through that area I showed you earlier, the John Hancock building, right through the back bay of Boston, the Prudential Center area, and then went north by Mass Ave Bridge, which was all water then, and then they went west on the Charles River, and then they went to land right where the British spies had mapped it out for them to land. Not one of the soldiers knowing where he's going, only 5 men on horseback. Okay, they knew where they were going, but the 700 soldiers, 100% woolen uniforms, bright red. But when they got there, what the spies didn't know, being on horseback themselves, was that the water was full of weeds. So now these guys had to hop out of their boats and into the water and carry their boats up onto the land. Now they're soaking wet. Okay, 100% woolen uniforms. You can imagine it. Here they come, trudging along. No idea where they're going, how far. Now, up to this point, they've probably marched about 5 to 5.5 miles, all right? Right here, and oh, are they tired? Now, Paul Revere, he sees the 2 lanterns lit. He knew if they were going by boat, they'd be pretty fast. And out he comes with William Dawes and Thomas Prescott to the taverns to warn the men. And they didn't yell, the British are coming, the British are coming, right? That was the poem. Everybody was British. Why would they say that, right? Their actual words were, the regulars are out, the regulars are out. The British soldiers were known as regulars, or redcoats. And then they would start the warning. But the British soldiers now, they're getting pretty tired. A lot more than they thought. They weren't in as good a shape as they thought. And they stopped here to rest at the Monroe Tavern, right here on our left. Okay, now, a lot of it isn't original. It's been redone. You can see the inside is more original than the outside. You know, it only lasts so long, the wood. You can see the base of it, though, is very original. And the lantern on the corner there, that's an original lantern, all right. And they had a rest here that they were so tired, all right. And now here come all the men as they come out to the taverns, and each man that lived in the taverns now, they had their assignments. Okay, now it's getting to be what, 1:30, 1:45 in the morning. A little bit different than the way they practiced in the evenings, you know, where they were kind of ready for it and everything. So now they go up pounding on the doors. You got to understand, folks, there was a time when there was no cell phones, okay? So they had to do this by word of mouth, pounding on the doors, waking the farmers up. And now they're getting up. Oh, now they're waking up. They got to wash their face. Now they gotta get a cup of coffee, saddle their horse. Now the kids are up. Daddy, where you going? Where you going, right? It's the middle of the night. And oh, don't worry, obey your mom, do your chores and all. So it took a little bit longer than they had originally planned. They were so proud of naming themselves the Minutemen. So they kept doing it, and finally, they finally had 90 men at the Lexington Green on horseback with muskets. Now don't forget, folks, these guys were family, church-going men. They weren't military. They were not military trained or anything like that. All right, Captain Parker wasn't either. But it's unbelievable the split-second decisions that he was making, so important all the time. Well, number one, being at the Lexington Green. Here's Lexington Center. Okay, now he sends a couple of men forward to see if they could keep an eye on the British soldiers, and they saw him at the Monroe Tavern. And they came back and they told him, Captain Parker, there's a ton of them. What are we going to do? There's only 90 of us. How are we going to stop them? There's a statue of Captain Parker right above the car tops. The green statue, him holding a musket. And right between his statue and the church is the Lexington Green. That church was here at the time. And Captain Parker didn't care. He had the responsibility to stop these men. And he turned to his men and he told them, men, stand your ground. Don't fire unless fired upon. But if they mean to have a war, let it begin here. He was determined. Now here come the British soldiers, not even knowing where they are except for the 5 men on horseback. Probably bugs around them, chilly as anything because it was April, and they're soaking wet, so heavy, the clothes, and all of a sudden they walk right up, and there's all these men with muskets against them. They couldn't believe it. What was going on? Now, Paul Revere just happened to ride to one of the corners of the Lexington Green. I'll show you when we get back on the bus, and all of a sudden, a shot rang out. Nobody knows who shot it at all. I'll show you where he said it came from, and when this happened, the British soldiers, so upset and irritable and all of what was going on, they started shooting back, killing 8 men right there on the Lexington Green. Only 1 Minuteman fired back at them. There was their neighbors, their relatives, their friends, fellow Minutemen getting shot and killed right there, and they tended to their needs. Well, not only were the Minutemen and Captain Parker upset, but so was Lieutenant Colonel Francis Smith and Major Pitcairn. They were told not to hurt anybody, to get out here, make friends with the people, get rid of the munitions, but try to be friendly with them and spend a few days. And they told the men, retreat right away. What are you doing shooting? I never gave the order to shoot. And they told them to get back to the Monroe Tavern. Now, he's also sent 3 men on horseback up the path to the left that they knew about, okay? And to stop anybody from Lexington here, sending a message out to the people and getting everybody else riled up, okay? By the way, there was actually about 800 to 900 Minutemen, okay? That's how many farmers, but you gotta understand, 800 to 900 farms, you know, and how far an area it was before they got here. And he sent these 3 soldiers up there to stop anybody from sending the messages, and 1 soldier back to Boston to get some reinforcements. Captain Parker took his injured and deceased and put him in the Buckman Tavern. That's the yellow tavern behind the trees right there. You can look in the windows. And then he sent all his other men that were here up the path to the right, knowing the British didn't know about it. This was the path all the men were coming in, and he told them to get up to Pucketasset Hill. This was his split-second decision right away. And he had a few men stay on the path to turn the men around and up to Pucketasset Hill and tell them what happened as they came riding in. Okay, and then he told them all to go to every farm, every tavern, every church, any market, anything along the way, and to tell the people that if they see any British soldiers the rest of that day, he didn't know if they were coming back or not, but if they see him, to be nice to them, to offer them anything they need, okay, and to be real nice to them. This was these decisions that he was making right away. Now, I'm going to stop here. I'm going to let you out here, and we'll get back on the bus. I'll tell you more. A few things here. I will be parked to the left of the speed limit 30 sign, right where this car is going down here. You can't miss me. I have a big, huge bus. You'll see me. Well, look for the sun shining off my bald head there. I'll be to the left of the flag, all right, by the grave marker of all the men that were killed. Okay? You can also walk on all the grass you want, either here on the right or up in front of us. Okay, there's the Lexington Visitor Center, a lot of paraphernalia there, and restrooms. What looks like a bunch of grave markers there, folks, that's actually memorials to all the various USS Lexingtons that have served our forces. Okay, now also to the right of the flag is a grave, is the battle line with the words of Captain Parker right on it. Looks like a gravestone. And that United States flag right there, folks, is one of 6 deemed by the United States Congress never ever to be taken down, no matter what the weather is and whether there are lights shining on it or not. Obviously they replace it if it's tattered, and the others are the Betsy Ross's house, Arlington National Cemetery, Guadalcanal, Pearl Harbor, and the moon, right? There's a flag on the moon. And New York City flies one under those rules, as they definitely should. And every day it takes not to deem it by the United States Congress is 2 days too long, as far as I'm concerned. As far as I know, they haven't made them, New York City, one of those flags. But they do fly it like that. Okay, now, I gotta get my voice on that shit. Look at this, 10:53. We're doing great, folks. Let's take a, how about 11:20? That'll give us a real good time here. Take your time, get into everything. Talk to the people there. There might be some folks dressed like a Minuteman or a British soldier that you might want to talk to. A little calmer than yesterday. I'll tell you what happened yesterday. This place was packed. Okay? But,
they're on the back. $24 for all the places. Yeah. Plus your tax. 24. Some of them were wrapped with the cost.
Here's the visitor center. Here's the memorial. This is a tavern where they took the injured men. It's right across the street from the statue. This is where the Battle of Lexington took place. Here's where the American soldiers lined up. The Minutemen. Where the first battle took place. And they carried their injured right over there to the tavern. And this is the back of it. And we're going to get on our bus.
The same number, not 700 people or 90 even. It's scaled down though, but the people, they all have to start off as a British soldier, and then they graduate to become a Minuteman. And then, yeah. And I was here with my daughters once when they were young, and we had to leave because those muskets, they are loud. The kids were crying. And yeah, every once in a while we'll run into them practicing here. They obviously do it every April 19th, and for other reasons, maybe during the summer or whatever. Yesterday was quite a day here, folks. They gave out 8 Medal of Honors to some men that fought in World War II. Right here, it was quite a thing. It was a lot of older people. They had a Navy band here playing and all. It's hard to tell right now, but yeah, it was quite a thing. Now this grave marker here, this is of all the folks that were killed. Now they weren't buried here originally because they didn't realize the significance of the battle. And it wasn't until 35, 40 years later that they exhumed the men's bodies from their graves and buried them here along with their leader, Captain Parker, who died of natural causes. This white church in front of us, that was here at the time with the bell tolling all the time. And it's up here underneath this tree with no leaves left. That's one of the first ones to turn in this area. And that Paul Revere rode up to, and it was there that he could see, heard the shot, and looked out, and you see the white building with the green trim on it behind the battle line? That's where it was here at that time. At the time, it's a barn-like structure, but it's obviously been redone and all, and he could see the smoke rising in the moonlight from the musket. Okay, and that's how he described this. Where the shot heard round the world was fired from, is what they call it. Now, we'll continue on. Hey, folks can still hear me in back there? Right? Can you still hear me in back?
That's the battle line right
all
there.
Right. Now, you know, that term, the shot heard round the world, that happened like 6 or 7 different times, depending on what author you read. Okay, there are some authors that say that the shot heard round the world was the Boston Massacre, as that was the first actual confrontation with violence in it that happened between the two groups, between the British and the colonists. Others say, and a lot of other people, and myself, that this shot, that nobody knows who shot it, that caused the British to fire their weapons at the Minutemen was the shot heard around the world. Others say that the one shot fired by the Minuteman back at the British was the shot heard around the world, as that's the first time a colonist, as a Minuteman in this instance, shot at the British. Then others say that the shots fired by the British at the Minutemen up at the North Bridge in Concord, that we'll talk about and learn about, was the shot heard around the world. And others say that the shots fired back by the Minuteman that killed 5 British soldiers at the North Bridge, that was the shot heard around the world. As a matter of fact, when we get there, you'll see it in writing, kind of saying you're here in Concord, where the shot heard around the world occurred. So it depends. Well, now don't forget 1960 when Bobby Thompson hit that home run in the World Series, right? They called that the shot heard around the world. You guys remember that? No? All right. All right. Well, the loudest one of them all was back around 1999 when I got home about 3 o'clock in the morning. That was, we don't talk about that anymore. So there were a lot of shots heard around the world, but, okay, depending on what author you read, actually. Now here you have those 700 British soldiers back at the Monroe Tavern awaiting their reinforcements, minus the one that went back to get them and the 3 soldiers that went forward to stop any message sending. Now, one thing I didn't mention was these 700 British soldiers, by the way, these were not the best soldiers that they had. They were actually the least experienced of all the soldiers. You see, General Gage and Lieutenant Colonel Francis Smith and Major Pitcairn didn't think anybody knew that they were on their way, okay, and that they took these men, the new men, least experienced anyways. I'm not going to say they were the worst soldiers, but they were the least experienced, and that's who they brought out here. Now the 200 men that were reinforcements, they were much more experienced soldiers that were sent out here. And if you think about it, they didn't know either where all these men were going. They had no idea. It was kept so secret so that nobody would find out and possibly get the word out to the people that lived out here. They were probably throwing a ball around or playing poker back in Boston. And all of a sudden they're told to put their 100% woolen uniforms and get out here. At least they knew where not to land their boats, so they had the dry uniforms anyways. And off they come. Right there, leaving from the Monroe Tavern. Look at the witch up there. See? I'm sorry. I should have pointed out beforehand. Did you see it in the flagpole?
Yeah.
So here they come, and they had no idea. 900 of them now. They had no idea what was going to happen to them. Who was awaiting them? How did these men know they were coming out here? These were all the questions they had. By the way, here's Minuteman Lane on the right. And the next street is Paul Revere Road. Okay, now you also have the 3 men that were out here awaiting in case anybody came out to stir the people up and to wake everybody up, let them know what happened at the Lexington Green. Who do you think they ran into? Paul Revere, William Dawes, and Thomas Prescott. Now Prescott and Dawes, 2 of the 3 main messengers, they took off as soon as they saw him, but the sergeant in charge, he concentrated on Paul Revere. There's his road there. And because he knew that Paul Revere was very vocal about his dislike of the British rule and all, and this is a man that'll definitely rile the people up. So he had one of his soldiers stay right with him, and he put a gun to his head. By the way, you'll notice MIT Lincoln Laboratories out here. I'll talk about that later. And he didn't want him escaping, even though they were told not to hurt anybody. He said, you watch this man and don't let him escape. He'll rile the people up. Here we come back onto Massachusetts Ave, folks, and we're coming right into the Minuteman National Historical Park, okay? And all of a sudden we had all those beautiful homes. Now we're in the woods. And we will see the path. There it is on the left, right there, in between what's known as a dry wall. I'll explain that a little bit more in a minute. And that'll wind in and out of us the whole time. Now, there is no borders of the Minuteman National Historical Park. It's everywhere. There's an Air Force base here. There's houses. There's a town of Concord, everything. So it's wherever you want it to be out in this area. Those of you on the left and those of you on the right can see written on the pillars of the path as it winds in and out of us all the way. And we'll walk on it also. The Battle Road of April 19th, 1775. And those of you on the right can see, right to the right, my right, that rock. And it says right on it, near here are buried British soldiers with the same date on it. And I'll explain to you why that rock is there and why it says what it says. Okay, as this area here became known as Bloody Angle. Okay, now as far as we're concerned, it's not the Battle Road yet. This is just the path that the British knew about. Okay, it's on the way back, and I'll tell you more about it. Okay, now obviously this path doesn't have the original dirt on it. It was probably actually thinner back then and not as wide as it is now. In some spots it thins out, trees all around it and all that, okay? But this was the path that they had used. You'll see it down there, then it'll come out to the road in front of us and all. So now you can also understand that these British soldiers, now 900 of them, it was quite a long line. Look how skinny it is there, right? There's 2 men abreast, that was it, pretty much. So you had quite a long line of British soldiers. right in here. Up here on the right, it comes right out to the road again and goes back in. Now these dry walls that I was telling you about, you'll see a lot more of them. They are everywhere. They're called dry walls because there's no cement involved in them. All they are, folks, is strategically placed rocks. Some of them are just 1 or 2 high, and there are other places when we get off the tour path and all, and right in just regular neighborhoods, we'll see some big, huge ones and all. Some of these around here might be a little bit newer, but as we go along the road, not the ones that follow along the road, but that go into the woods, you'll notice that the colors of them are much older, and they are much older, probably built back in the 1600s. Here's the path, once again, and what they are is men would get married and they'd come out here into this area with their wives and start a family and all, and they would find an area that nobody had claimed as their land yet and cut down the trees. And with the wood, they'd build a barn or a home and all. And then all the rest of it for firewood, obviously. A lot of work done. And then they would clear the land of the rocks on the top of the soil and then underneath it. And they would form these walls here. And that would be their property lines. You know, there are some folks, you know, everybody's got a hobby, that look into these and they say that there are some 34,000 miles of walls, dry walls throughout New England. So there's a lot of them. It's a very common thing over in Europe and England. Okay, they're very popular over there. Now these 3 men that captured Paul Revere with one right there with them, there's Paul Revere and this man at the Paul Revere capture site. We'll pull over there. And there's Paul Revere yapping at this guy. This poor soldier must have been scared to death. He didn't know where he was. At any time, someone could come out of the woods after him. Okay? And Paul Revere yapping away, and every hour must have seemed like a day, every day like a week. All right, to him in quite a long time. And finally, Paul Revere, after a few hours, told him, hey, you know, whatever your fellow British soldiers were out here to do, I'm sure they've already done it, like he didn't know why they were out here. And they're probably taking off already. I'll tell you what, I got a much better horse than you do. And why don't you take my horse and get back to Boston? No problem. And he showed him the paths to go. And that's how Paul Revere escaped. Now, Paul Revere's got the British soldier's horse. All right, and by the way, this is a capture site here, and with the coloring all around it of the British soldier. By the way, unfortunately, you know, I could just make this up. Somebody stole the sign that said the Paul Revere capture site. But once we get going, all right, over here on the left, by that dry wall, right where that Jeep coming at us is right now, that little brown sign. And it states right on it, the Paul Revere capture site, with the arrow going this way. So I'll slow down, you can turn to your left. Right there, and you'll see it, the Paul Revere capture site, all right? And as we get going, all right? By the way, there's an Air Force base up here that we're going to pass on the right, called Hanscom Air Force Base. We won't see any of it. It's out there. You might see some planes around, because it has runways on it. And what makes this different is now that an Air Force base in, I believe it's Washington or Oregon, is shut down, this is the only Air Force base with actual runways on it that have no military planes assigned to it. So all private planes and all that use this. As a matter of fact, I know for a fact we have some folks here from Texas. The Texas Rangers use Hanscom Air Force Base all the time, using they own a plane along with the Dallas Stars. They share the same plane, and they use this so they don't have to pay the heavy prices at Logan. Now here's Paul Revere on his way to warn John Hancock, riding on a British soldier's horse. He forgot about that with the coloring all around it. Here's the house that John Hancock put out in. All right, covered by a lot more woods than it is now. And the guard guarding the home, he didn't know who it was. He thought it was a British soldier. And he starts shooting at Paul Revere. And the muskets, obviously, now you got to remember these muskets, they were not made by machine, they were hand-rolled barrels. So the musket balls, big bullets more or less of what they were, they went flying off in different directions. So they were only good 10, 15, maybe 20 feet. And the shooting awoke John Hancock, and he came out and he asked, "What are you doing?" Shooting at Paul Revere. "Paul, what's wrong? What's wrong?" And he told them the regulars were out, and they were on the way. Look how close the path is to it. Okay? And that's where John Hancock appreciated that, and him and his proteges took off north to get out of here. If he hadn't warned them, and they ever captured him, who would have signed our Declaration of Independence? So it's a good thing that happened. Now, by the way, there's a Hartwell Tavern in here. Unfortunately, we won't see it. It's in the woods, all right? But as you can see, a lot more of these dry walls all around here. And we're in a town called Lincoln. By the way, you might have seen the sign, incorporated in 1754. So you know it wasn't named after Abe, right? He wasn't around then. Okay? And now you have these 900 British soldiers. They get back to the Buckman Tavern. And it was here they were welcomed with open arms. They didn't know anybody was going to shoot at them or what was going to happen. And the men at the Buckman Tavern, they told them, "Oh, we're sorry about what happened. Some guys found out you guys are coming out here, you know, and they got together to try to stop you. We don't know why." And they gave them that same old story. Well, they didn't know whether to believe, but don't worry, nobody's going to shoot at you. All these men, they had to get back to their farms. You can't go a day without farming, you know. Nobody will bother you. Anything we can do for you, food, drink. Well, they didn't know whether to believe it or not, but they kept marching. And then they got there to the Hartwell Tavern, and they were pretty much given the same old story. Okay, these guys made like they didn't know that much about it. Okay, like because nobody came out here to tell them. There you go, folks. Entering Concord, incorporated 1635. 15 years after the Pilgrims arrived. Okay, it shows you. 80 miles away, 15 years, and how many people moved over here real fast. And finally, the British soldiers, they get to the Wright Tavern, and we'll see that. Okay, and it was there. These were the men that kicked the spies out. But doing what Captain Parker told them to do, they welcomed them with open arms. And they noticed, "You guys are awfully tired. I'll tell you what, if you'd like, why don't you rest and use our green to rest at the Concord Green," as every city and town has a green or a common. And they did this. And Lieutenant Colonel Francis Smith and Major Pitcairn, by now, were convinced that nobody was going to try to stop them. Everybody was nice. Farmers were waving to them. Children were coming out waving. Everybody was so nice. Without a doubt, this was just something odd that happened there at the Lexington Green. And he let the men rest that had been with them from the beginning. Here's another entering Concord sign on the left. And he took the 200 soldiers, now much more experienced soldiers, now up to the North Bridge in Concord, while the men with the heavy wet uniforms rested. Now, all this time, all these men were coming in, Minutemen, little by little, and being turned around up the Puckatassett Hill. Now they had close to about 650 soldiers up there. Well, not soldiers, farmers, Minutemen, with muskets and horses and all, okay? Just farmers, church-going family men. And the men that were on the Concord Green, they started a fire. This fire started getting really out of control, catching onto the eaves of some of the buildings and all. And Captain Parker, he looks down and sees these flames. He couldn't help but see them. They were only a mile away. And they figure, "Oh, they're burning our town down." He looks down at the North Bridge in Concord, and there's 200 new men. He could tell they were new because they had dry uniforms. And he tells his men, "Let's go, they're getting way too close. We have to stop them right there." And they come down the hill. They couldn't believe it. These men, they never knew that all these men were getting together. And the new soldiers, now that had just been in Boston hours before, without being told by their commanding officer, start shooting at them. Okay, and they never hit any of them. Captain Parker tells his men, "Men, we have to fight back. You have to shoot back." Directed his men to shoot their muskets low, knowing they'd kick high. As they came down, it was there that they started shooting them and killing 5 of the men right there. Well, Lieutenant Colonel Francis Smith and Major Pitcairn said, "That's it. This is not going the right way. We've killed them. Now they've killed us. We have to get back to Boston and come back another time." And he told his men, "Let's go. We're up. were going back to Boston. And they picked up the men at the Concord Green and came back the only path they ever knew. Just what Captain Parker wanted. He told his men, you guys know what path they're going. You guys know every hill, every tree, every rock along the way. Right out through the woods in front of them and pick them off as they go by. Now I'm going to get back to more of the story. I got a little ahead of ourselves. There's a few things I'd like to show you out here in Concord first. And the first one is this yellow home here on the right. And this is the home of Nathaniel Hawthorne. All right, they call it the Wayside House here. Look at how it's constructed, even way up top there. And Mr. Hawthorne now, he wrote the first 2 books when he lived in the city of the witches, Salem, okay? And with the money that he made with that, he came down here with the real nice areas, the affluent areas, okay? Out here, very nice area to live in, and he built this house here. And he had a buddy of his by the name of Mr. Alcott, and he let Mr. Alcott, his family lived with them while he built the house. I guess you'd call it next door back then. A little bit of woods in between. And there it is up there that we'll see. And Mr. Alcott also built a home behind it. You'll see a real ugly tree in the front there, and it's right behind that tree. And that's where he lived. 2 of his teenage daughters lived. And that's where one of his daughters, Louisa May, wrote the book. Go ahead. Little Woman, right? There you go. And there's the home back there. And there's the family house, okay? And this is called the Orchard House. And you can see what I mean. It's an odd looking tree there. And you'll see it in just a bit when we go by. Almost to the day, a couple of years ago, was they had Mrs. Barbara Bush was there and hopped on the bus, shook hands with everybody. Kind of nice. She never wrote me back though. I wish you folks could get out and visit these places and all. It's just not a part of the tour as my company designed it. But you can very easily get out here, you know, by public transportation. Right to that Lexington Visitor Center that you were at. And there's a little, like, mini bus that goes around to all these different spots. And will stop and let you off and pick you up and bring you to another. Okay? If you're ever inclined to come out here. There's even a museum up here on the front left that has a lot of definite Revolutionary War history and a lot of Civil War history, believe it or not, that happened in this area. And this museum also has the actual lantern that Paul Revere carried with him on his ride, letting the folks know that the regulars were out. And on the left here, we'll be going down that road. That White House there, that's the home of Ralph Waldo Emerson. Pretty fairly good author himself. And we'll be coming into the center of Concord. Definitely fits under the word point. There's that little bus there. And on the left, we'll see the Wright Tavern, W-R-I-G-H-T. That's how you spell it. And it's a red building with black trim around it. And that's the tavern that kicked out the spies. And then welcome. There's no way I can make this without hitting the sign. This is who else this guy party. I'd rather hit the sign and take his mirror off, so. And then welcome the soldiers and had them rest at the green, right behind the American flag that you see right there. And across the street from the Wright Tavern is a cemetery. Now they nicknamed it Sleepy Hollow out here. It's not the real Sleepy Hollow. That's in Tarrytown, New York. But this is where all these famous authors are buried that I previously told you about, including Thoreau. Okay, there's the Wright Tavern on the left. I don't think those air conditioners were in the windows back then. And here's Sleepy Hollow here on the front right. All these famous authors. Quite a thing, folks. Right there. You can tell a very old cemetery, though, flowers and all that. Look at this. These bicycles, man. You don't want me starting to talk about them, okay? You know, these folks now, they look like all day. You know, that's different. maybe they're going on a side street, okay. But these other ones, I think it's just an excuse to wear tight pants. I don't know. They're just in and out of us. It's so dangerous. Now here you go, a nice mini Bunker Hill Memorial with the words "Faithful unto Death" right on it. Right here on the concrete green, obviously a lot larger back then. Now check out the Colonial Inn right in front of us, built in 1716. You notice anything about it? Check out the chimneys. Yeah, that's what Daniel Bliss, the guy that squealed on the munitions, that's how he made his money, the inn, the market, and the restaurant, right there. Okay? And up here on the right, there's his house. The second house, the light-colored one. Now, obviously, it's been redone and added to and all, but look at the chimneys, too. Why would you need two chimneys on a little tiny house like that? Because back then, no oil heat, gasoline, or electrical heat, and they had fireplaces in every room. All right, so there you go. And that's how you know he knew. This is probably the path right here. I actually think it went behind these homes somewhere up here, the actual path, and then it came down and it crossed. Now, this Sudbury River, this is just more like a stream now. The bridge itself, it's the seventh recreation of a wooden bridge, you know, the wood rots away and stuff. You know, we have winters here, don't forget. So, even though it's such a gorgeous day today. And then Puckatassa Hill, when you're on the bridge, is the hill up to the right. And up at the top is where they have the munitions were being stored and all. Now this home here, there's no sense coming over here. This is called the Old Manse. But this is actually where Hawthorne passed away, in this home right here, the Hawthorne. And there's really nobody over there now. It has more to do with the authors and all than it does the Revolutionary War. And across the street, you'll have to go, and there's nice little stories along the actual path itself. And it's not that far at all. It's boom, right over that little hill. So it's not a long walk at all. And on your right, on the way down, are restrooms, and they'll be on your left on the way back. As you go around the corner there, straight ahead of us, there's Puckatassa Hill up there. Now, unfortunately, they didn't realize the significance of the battle back then, and they used a lot of the hill for landfill, one way or another out in this area. But you can see, there's no sense really of walking all the way up there. There's not much to see, all right? But you get a pretty good idea of where we are and what's going on. Okay, so please be careful crossing the street. The folks that live in the area are great about it, but you never know who's driving down the street. And as I say, there are nice little stories along the way, included right in front of this sidewalk here, the inscription. And it is 1150. Okay, how about? Well, at the most 12:15, okay? I don't know if you need that much time, but you could do it.
scenery. Concord fight. On the morning of April 19, 1775, all the British held this bridge. The Minutemen and militia of Concord and neighboring towns gathered on the hill across the river to let them burn the town. You let them burn the town down. There the Lincoln Captain William Smith offered to dislodge the British. The action and the Concord Colonel James Barnett ordered the attack on the regulars. The column was led by Major John Burdett, marching from his own farm. The leader was Lieutenant John Robinson of Worcester.
And they picked up the men in downtown Concord there that were sleeping. They were so tired with those heavy wet uniforms. Well, they certainly couldn't be happy about this change of plans. And they picked them up and off they go. Now these men, all the Minutemen, they're going through the woods. You know, Captain Parker actually wanted them. How are we doing on the right there?
Clear.
This was when we first saw the path itself. But some of these men, these Minutemen, okay, these were, as I say, farmers, church-going family men, okay, they're starting to realize now what's going on. They knew that the rest of this land, the Americas, was all wanted to get rid of the British rule. And now they're starting to realize that this is the beginning of it, that this is the beginning of the Revolutionary War. And they were like really pumped up. This was it. Things they've been talking about all these years. And some of the men, they got down there by the Hawthorne and Alcott home area, and they saw the men marching by, and they started shooting at them there. They didn't hit anybody with their musket balls, but at the same time now they're warning the British that they're going to get shot at from in the woods and all. And the men scattered when the shots rang out, and then they got back together and started marching again. But 3 soldiers, they got lost in the woods. And here they were wandering around. They had no idea where they were, whether they were going north, south, east, or west. They were hungry, they were tired, they were thirsty. And finally they peeked through the woods and they saw a lady tending to her garden on her farm. Now she had no idea what happened at Lexington or at the North Bridge here in Concord. You know, there was no CNN breaking news or anything like that, right? And these 3 men walked right up to this lady and surrendered to her. So how do you think she felt? Well, she's a pretty smart lady. First of all, her husband was one of the Minutemen, and she thought it odd that they did awaken him in the middle of the night instead of the usual evening practice. So she thought something might be going on, and she took the 3 muskets of these soldiers and threw them in the pond on her property to render them useless. And then took 2 of them and rendered them useless, and took the 3rd one and marched these 3 soldiers over to her neighbor's home, who was also a wife of a Minuteman. And these 2 ladies kept these 3 men as prisoners of war for close to 36 hours. There's the right tavern once again, until they were taken in as actual prisoners of war. So that's a true story. There's actually a little book written about that, with the ladies' names and all, and I don't know if they were interviewed or what, but there is a little book telling you all about that. So now the men, they kept marching down the only path that they knew with these bright red uniforms on. Now you gotta move the sign over to the other side. And you know, they certainly were in contrast with the green leaves and all, as it was springtime. And they kept marching, and then they got to that area of Bloody Angle, and the Minutemen were awaiting them right there, and all sorts of casualties happened there. And then they kept marching, and now you have men carrying other men that were injured, and then the men that had been with them from the beginning with these heavy wet uniforms, you know, no laundromat to throw a quarter in or anything like that and dry them. And they were just so tired from it. Emerson's house once again on the right. And they finally got to that area where that low bridge was in Belmont, back then called Monotony. And it was there that Lieutenant Colonel Francis Smith and Major Pitcairn had no choice but to let the men rest. As they were falling anyways, passing out and all. So he had them rest. And he had the 200 men that were reinforcements with the dry uniforms in much better shape surround these men while they were resting. Well, this was just what Captain Parker wanted. He saw this, and he had his men surround the men that were surrounding the men that were resting. And that's where they had a lot more casualties right there. And then finally, hours later, they finally got back to Boston. Oh, the casualties were unbelievable. More than 1/3 of the soldiers killed by muskets. Now, when you think about it, that's a lot. You know, nowadays they have machine guns and everything. They did have cannons back then, but they weren't in use on this first day and all. Or first, actually, close to 2 days. Boy, so from the time they left until the time they get back was over 30 hours. And they hadn't done as much marching as we've done driving, but they must have been pretty good. Now, General Gage had a pretty good idea that something bad had happened because the men had come back to get some reinforcement, but he couldn't believe it. How many men were killed and all, and he didn't know what to do. So he didn't want to make the decision. This was a war that was beginning. These men were supposed to be out here making friends with the people. So we had them all go into their encampment, their barracks and all, as he had to send a boat back to England to let King George III make the decision as to what to do, continue on the fighting or what. This was the best thing that happened to the people here, because it was during this interim that the word spread throughout the land as to what was going on. And all the various militias would all get together during this time that the boat was going back to England. And then I'm sure there were a few days that it took for King George to make up his mind of what to do, and then to get all the men assembled and all that, and back on ships. So it must have taken a while. And it was during that time that all the militias got together, and they formed the Continental Army under the command of General Artemus Ward at the time. And then the men came back from England, right on ship. Now, a lot of them were dropped off along the eastern seaboard, but most of them came right back here to Boston, as this was the area that was real bad. And the first thing they were told by King George III to do was to take over Bunker Hill, as Bunker Hill was across from the British encampment at the Boston Harbor, where it wasn't as wide as other places, right by the Charles River. And by taking over Bunker Hill, that way they could control all the ships going in and out of the Boston Harbor or going into the Charles River. And somehow or another, the Continental Army found out about it. Now, I've read 2 different ways, or a bunch of different ways how that might have happened, but the most agreeable one was that girlfriend-boyfriend thing. There were some young ladies madly in love with their British soldier boyfriends. They were throwing rocks over the British encampment wall with notes on them. And he possibly wrote back and told her that they were going to leave on June 13th to go to Bunker Hill and take over Bunker Hill, and he'd meet her along the way. And maybe she let her father know or whatever, and it got back to the Continental Army. So General Artemus Ward, he put in charge a man by the name of Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Gridley, in charge of the troops that were to take care of Bunker Hill. And as he's marching his men, early on that morning of June 13th up to Bunker Hill, he had to cross over another hill called Breed's Hill. And as he's crossing over Breed's Hill, he realizes if he had to cross Breed's Hill to get to Bunker Hill, so won't the British soldiers. So he directed his men to dig a trench inside of Breed's Hill and to hide in that trench and not to shoot till they see the whites of their eyes. That's where that phrase came from. And that happened all of a sudden. Now you gotta understand, Minutemen were involved in this Continental Army. Even civilians were involved in this, including Dr. Thomas Prescott. one of the messengers who was killed in this battle, unfortunately. But now, here come the British soldiers, and a lot more than they ever expected, and the men popped up and started shooting, causing all sorts of casualties. They couldn't believe it. They weren't even on, they didn't think they were at Bunker Hill, and how did these men know that they were coming? Okay, and then once again, like, for the British soldiers, how did they know that they were coming? And they retreated 4 times until they finally came back. The 4th time with the cannons that had been unstuck from the mud along the way. And the Continental Army by this time had run out of ammunition. They were throwing sticks and rocks at them and all that. But there was nothing Lieutenant Colonel Richard Gridley could do, and he gave them Breed's Hill. Did you guys know there was never ever a shot fired on Bunker Hill ever? As a matter of fact, everything happened on Breed's Hill. And the Bunker Hill Memorial today is on Breed's Hill. Nothing ever happened on Bunker Hill. It's a bunch of yucky condos up there now. It is, really. And yeah, as a matter of fact, the Bunker Hill Memorial on Breed's Hill is the only memorial to a battle that we actually lost. Okay? Now, the war went on for 2 more years, we won, and now we're the United States of America. Okay. And that's the end of the war. Like I told you, I was going to end it abruptly, alright? Here we go. Now, we are going through these nice areas here. It's beautiful. Okay, and I'm going to show you a few things. These used to be the major highways at one time, back before about 1953 or so. And over here on the left, folks, you will see a copy of the cabin that Thoreau lived in. There you go. With the nice little wood shed in behind there and all. Okay. Now, obviously, that's a copy. You might see about 20 feet in front, right almost across from me. These people will be looking at a statue of Thoreau. It looks like a tree, though. That's what makes it difficult. Look how short he is. I don't know if it's a natural, but he's awfully short. Check this out on the right. Walden Pond right there. Okay? It is beautiful, yeah. Very nice and clean and all. No lifeguard on duty today. They're gone. It was the park rangers that were lifeguards. The only motorboat allowed on the pond is the lifeguard boat. Those of you that would like to take a picture of it, the best picture you can get is right up here before that cement stairway that goes down. It's the best shot. Now, Thoreau's cabin was way on the other side of the woods, about 6 feet in, when he did all his writings. Okay? Here's about the best shot you're going to get of it right there. And, you know, there is a Thoreau Club. And it's about 50 people or so that belong to it. And every once in a while they write an article about them in one of the newspapers. And one of the rules of belonging to this club for Thoreau, people that were so moved by his works, is that you have to dip your body in that pond every day of the year. And during the winter time, they saw a hole in the ice. Obviously, there are some days that you're allowed to miss so many days, I think is the actual rules for it or something. And they get together, I think, every day and go over a paragraph of some story and something like that, I'm not sure. So, of course, if Thoreau played baseball, I could tell you a lot more. Yeah, but that's not part of the Revolutionary War either, so I don't know. You see these guardrails here? They're wooden here, but further on, you'll see some definite old guardrails with the white clay, soft hard clay, or metal wires in between to show you how these were all the major highways at one time. Now, I don't know if you got it quickly about how this happened. By the way, this area is here. This is where MIT and Harvard does a lot of research. Believe it or not, on dirt. They call it soil, but you know, so the nutrients and all that go into it, how long they last, even things like what kind of worms and bugs and the best for growing fruits and vegetables or whatever you want to grow. Yeah, it's unbelievable the research they do. Well, all these leaves that you see here, and in all the trees, and you can't go anywhere in New England, even downtown Boston, without being able to turn somewhere and see a tree. Because there's so many of them in this New England that every leaf really all year is the color that it turns to in the fall here. But the green is the chlorophyll, the life of the leaf. And at this time of year when the sun isn't out as long and the days are shorter and the nights are somewhat chilly, the tree starts to realize that it should get rid of its leaves to get ready for the winter. So the chlorophyll starts to seep out little by little, the green in the leaf. And as that happens, the sugars are exposed. And the sunlight shining on these sugars is what makes it turn these beautiful colors and all. And this year is going to be real nice. Now look in front of us. It's hardly at all, right? Across that green. So you can see how we're not really even at half peak now. Some places are. The ones that turn first are usually the old trees or the somewhat ill trees or trees whose roots are in water. That then the tree thinks that it's later in the year. That it really is the water stays colder during the day. Not that I can think like the trees. You know, that's pretty much. Look at this now. What it's going to be like another 10 days, the archway of beautiful colors and all. And look at these dry walls up here. See what I mean? These were probably made in the 1700s, right here. Okay, and they are very old. And look at all the storms that they've withheld, and hurricanes and blizzards and all that. No cement used, just strategically placed rocks and all. You know, we have millions of people that come every fall from all over the world to view our foliage. It's so colorful throughout all of New England. Not one of them brings a rake with them to help us clean it up. Oh yeah, you gotta see, I'm used to it, you know. So all my life here, and you gotta rake them up. No two ways about it. Even if you don't have a tree on your property and it's your neighbor's leaves, it doesn't matter. You gotta rake them up. You can see where the cows are today here on the right. There they are. They usually underneath that tree this time of day. What a bunch of laziness, huh? There's some sheep and stuff over there. We're in the town Lincoln once again. All right, you'll know when we get into